What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. Today we're going to be talking about how to find bass on river systems. And this is actually the first live stream I'm going to start putting on the Fish the Moment podcast on the Apple iTunes app, Spotify, and anywhere else where you find your podcasts. And so if you're listening on the podcast app, welcome. And then for all those who are listening during the live stream, welcome as well. Good to see everyone on the stream as usual. We got Quincy, Ulysses, Brandon, Gary, Skeeter, Mitch, Daryl. A lot of people on, which is awesome. And so it's great to see everyone on the stream tonight. And we're going to continue with the format I was doing in my last stream, which is kind of doing a 45-minute to an hour seminar. And then after that, I'm going to answer questions that you guys are putting in the live chat. And so if you're in the live chat, then just put @FishTheMoment before your question and then a bunch of question marks at the end, and I'll get to your questions. And so I don't want to waste too much time at the beginning here, especially for those podcast listeners, and so I'm going to jump straight into the stream, and I'll be answering some questions about halfway through as well, just to kind of keep a pulse on what's going on in the comments. And so seeing everyone on the stream, I'm just not going to get to every single comment during the actual stream itself. So anyways, guys, excited to talk about river systems, so let's jump straight into it. Let me just pull this up over here. So river systems, and really there's a lot of different types of river systems, and there's no one really good definition for what a river system is. So I want to start by describing the different types of rivers and how I would break it up across the United States into the different types of river situations you might face. And so first thing is to differentiate the difference between a river system and a lake. And this is pretty important just because you may not be sure if you're actually on a river system or on a lake. Sometimes you have these river system lakes. It can be very confusing. But the way that I differentiate lakes and river systems is by thinking about these three factors: whether there's strong and consistent current, whether you have a deep main river channel, and you have backwaters as opposed to creeks. And so that strong current can be man-made current, where you have actual dams on both sides of your fishery. That's like a Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA lake. It could be a river that's basically a free-flowing river. There's some dams that somewhat control the flow, but they basically just let the water go through all the time. And then you have your rivers that have no dams on them. There's just straight current flowing all the time. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about river systems. And I'll kind of get into all the different types of river systems during the stream, the areas, techniques, seasonal patterns that you need to be using in each of the different styles of rivers. The other thing I'm really looking for are rivers with deep main river channels. I'm talking 20 to 30 feet deep in the center of the rivers. So we're not going to be talking so much about like the creeks and very small shallow rivers you might like wade in or go kayaking in. I'm talking more about the rivers you take a bass boat on and fish a bass tournament on. You can obviously fish kayak tournaments on rivers, but you guys get what I mean. And then last thing is you want to have backwaters as opposed to creeks. And throughout the stream, I'll kind of differentiate backwaters from creeks and explain how they're different, how they set up differently from your traditional lakes to the rivers, so you can maybe try to take some of the knowledge you have from your lake fishing and translate over to river fishing, and then vice versa. So that's just a basic definition of your river systems. So next up, let's talk about the different types of rivers. And basically, there are 5 types that I have kind of identified here. There may be more, but this is kind of how I've categorized it in my head at least. First are your river system lakes. And this is going to be like your Tennessee Valley Authority lakes, your TVA lakes. So the Kentucky lakes, the Gunnersvilles, Chickamauga. It's these lakes that have dams on both sides, and there's current that flows through, and a lot of times the current is man-made current for hydroelectric power, and you can have a lot of these chains. You have the Coosa River, which is kind of like Logan, Martin, that whole chain of lakes there, and then you have them all over the country basically, especially in the south. And I'm not going to talk too much about these river system lakes during this stream just because I talk about them all the time in my other videos, and they're very popular fisheries. And so I want to focus more on your, I guess, more traditional rivers when you think river fishing as opposed to like a Tennessee River lake. And so the second type of fishery you can, or a river system you can fish, is a large southern river. This would be like the Arkansas River, the Red River, the Washita River. There's a lot of river systems that are in the south, and this is kind of your traditional muddy water, shallow, flipping, spinner baiting, that sort of thing. And you have current generating, you have main river jetties, stuff like that. And that's what a lot of guys think of when they think river fishing, when they think about fishing down south. Next are your larger northern rivers. This is like the Mississippi River, the Ohio River. There's a lot of rivers that are kind of up in that northern part of the United States. And so we'll be talking about how to target those as well. So your large northern rivers, and those are kind of characterized by having smallmouth and largemouth mixed in a lot of those rivers. Next are your tidal rivers, and this is like the Potomac River. You can also have tides down like the California Delta. You can have it over in the Louisiana Delta. A lot of these tidal fisheries where the ocean actually pushes into your river system, and the lake will fluctuate 2 to 4 feet sometimes depending on what that tide is doing. And so there's a lot of these smaller tidal rivers all around the kind of borders of the United States, and so we'll be talking about those as well. And then last up, we have like the small rivers that you might go wading in that maybe only go to be 5, 6, 8 feet deep, which might be like the Milwaukee River in Wisconsin, the White River. There's a million rivers everywhere. These are just 2 I've fished before. So those are different types of rivers, and we're going to kind of break down each type of those, or at least the middle 3 here. So large southern rivers, large northern rivers, and the tidal rivers. So that is kind of what we'll be talking about. And so let's jump into the first river, which is your large southern river systems. And I just kind of want to go through some of the basics, and I'm also going to be pulling up some Google Earth and Navionics images of the river to show you where I would be fishing. And so if you're listening to this on the podcast, I'm going to try to be as specific as possible and explain what I'm looking at, but it may not be a bad idea after you listen to this podcast while you're riding to the lake or whatever to go back in at night and look through some of the images I'm showing. It'll definitely help wrap up everything. But again, I'll try to explain it the best I can. This is the first time I'm ever doing this for a podcast, and so I'm just trying to see if this works. I've had a few requests from guys who just want this to listen to when they go to the lake, so hopefully that is helpful for you guys. So some of the key factors you're looking for on these large southern rivers are current, vegetation, and time of year. And so the current is going to be a huge factor, and that's kind of the defining feature of river systems. Another thing on these southern rivers that's really important is vegetation, whether that is lily pads, if you have coontail grass. Some of these rivers have hydrilla grass in them, though not that many. And you also have bank grass like water willow, you'll have reeds. So vegetation plays a really big role on your rivers, and depending on the amount of vegetation you have, it can dictate how well the bass spawn, as well as how the fish position in different times of the year. And then lastly is the time of year. It's a pretty big factor on rivers. These fish will move from the main river back into backwaters and back out a lot of times. And so we'll talk about how those seasonal patterns go as well. And so to start out, let's talk about current. Current is the #1 factor that you need to be looking at when you go to a river system. And if you don't have or if you're not consistently checking the dam release schedule on your river system, you need to be doing that. I usually check it 3 or 4 days before I go fish a river, the day before I fish the river, the day of when I'm actually fishing the river, and then I'll also check it periodically throughout the day to see what is the actual release in cubic feet per second. That's kind of your, I guess, benchmark you want to be looking at, especially if you have dams on your river. If you don't have dams on the river, then it's a little bit harder to get this data. But if you are fishing like the Arkansas River, you can go onto the Arkansas River website for the Corps of Engineers and find the dam release schedule. And really what I'm looking for this dam release schedule is I want to see, are they running current, 1? And if they are running current, you're going to fish a certain way. If they're not running current, you're going to fish a different way. Another thing that you want to focus on is the amount of current. And so a lot of times if you have really, really strong current, then let's say you have current that's maybe 50, 60, or 70,000 cubic feet per second, those fish are going to bite very differently than when you have, let's say, 5,000 cubic feet per second of current, or maybe 15,000. And I've talked about this in my last live stream, but really my threshold for a good main river bite or a good bite with the current is 30,000 cubic feet per second. Just drill that number in your head, 30,000 cubic feet per second. If you have that, then the fish are going to be biting really well. If you don't, the bite could be a little bit tough. And then the other threshold is above 100,000 cubic feet per second. That's going to be your small craft advisories. It's going to be dangerous to get out on the rivers a lot of times, and you're going to get swept up by the current if you're not in a big boat and you're very smart with how to run down the river and kind of how to fish out there. So if you're seeing these dam release levels above 100,000 cubic feet per second, just be careful. I've fished out there at like 250,000 cubic feet per second before in the Arkansas River, and so it's not impossible, but it's maybe not recommended. I would just wear a life jacket all day if you're going to do it. Anyways, so next up is where to fish when there's current. So let's talk about the different times or kind of different areas you want to fish when there's current versus when there's not current. And so the 3 types of areas I focus on when I'm fishing on river systems in the south, like the Arkansas River, the Red River, the Washita River, places like that, is main river jetties, main river grass, and main river laydowns. And if you kind of pay attention there, everything that I said in that situation was main river, main river, main river. If there's current, especially 30,000 cubic feet per second of current, fish the main river on these river systems. Usually those fish are very easy to catch, they're easy to find, and they're easy to pattern. And usually if that current is flowing and you start catching them on one jetty, you can usually catch them on a lot of different jetties on the river. Same thing with grass. If you find them in one stretch of grass, you can catch them on multiple stretches of grass. Same thing with the laydowns. And what I want to do now is actually jump over to Google Earth and show you some of my favorite river spots in the main current on the Arkansas River in a pool that I grew up fishing. It's the Maumelle Pool, Pool 7 of the Arkansas River, and it was literally, a boat ramp was 3 minutes from my house, so I fished out here a ton. And I fished river systems in general a lot. I've had experience on all these different types of rivers, so just so you guys know, I am talking from personal experience and a significant amount of experience, so this isn't just me kind of making stuff up. So let me pull up Google Earth here and just kind of show you guys what I am looking for on Google Earth. So here is the Arkansas River Pool 7, Maumelle Pool. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a river system, if you weren't sure up to this point through my explanations. Basically, it's something, it's going to be some type of water where maybe it's no more than, I would say, 200, 300 yards across at the widest section. You kind of have a lake portion down here, which is a little bit wider, but the majority of the Arkansas River is going to be no further across than maybe 2 to 3 football fields across. That's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm thinking about, a regular river. Also has dirty water most of the time because of all that current. And we will talk about water clarity because that's something that's really important in the seasonal patterns that we can talk about. But in general, when there's a lot of current flowing through the dams on Pool 7 of the Arkansas River or any of these river systems, I'm looking for, again, jetties, grass, and laydowns. And so I want to show you a few different areas where I have jetties, grass, and laydowns, and areas I've caught really good fish in the past and stuff I'm looking for when I'm going to the rivers. So let's start with the jetties. And there's a couple of jetties down here, actually, that we'll just start on. And there's 2 types of jetties on the Arkansas River. There's going to be the short rock jetties that run out. Actually, there's going to be several different types of jetties. I apologize, but the first one is the short little jetties that stick out every once in a while in the river. Then you have your jetties that are actual underwater jetties that are a little bit harder to see. So, for example, there's a jetty right here that sticks out from this point all the way out, and you can actually see this little pole, this piling, and there's these underwater jetties. They're made of rock. These are jetties that are very hard to see, and the only way you're really going to know that those jetties are there, to be honest, is if you, let me pull this up real quick, if you're looking at your Navionics mapping. And so when you're running down the rivers, just be careful because there are a lot of places where you'll see, like, for example, that black line, that is a jetty. And it says pipeline, but it's actually just a jetty that's in like a foot of water, and if you run over the top of that, you will like tear off your lower unit. And so there's like another jetty right here that sticks out that's all underwater. You will not see these jetties. And so you want to make sure you're following your channel markers, make sure you're running within the channel and you're not getting out of the channel, because you can run across jetties very easily on the Arkansas River and other river systems. But jumping back over to Google Earth really quick, let me go back over here. You have these underwater submerged jetties. You also have your visible jetties, so the ones that are very visible, and they're just made of rock, and they'll be sticking out in the middle of the lake. They're very easy to see. And some of them are going to be just sticking straight out. Some of them come out and kind of form at an angle, so you have these jetties that kind of make these L shapes to the jetties, and those are pretty interesting as well. And then the last type of jetty you're going to have are actually some wood piling jetties, and these are some of my favorite jetties to fish. Let me find some right here. I need to get my bearings of where I am. The pool, here we go. So you got these wood piling jetties, and this one's a little bit hard to see, but this is one of them. And what it is there's actually these wood pilings. I'm going to go back in time here just to see if we can get a little bit better image when this river is a different pool. There we go. So right here, this is a jetty that sticks out, and it's just made of big, round wood pilings. And all these jetties will hold fish, and I find that certain times of the year, some jetties are better than others. For example, I like to fish the wood pole jetties, or the wood piling jetties in the fall. Those seem to do best for me in the fall. And then I like to fish the rock jetties the best in the post-spawn and in the summertime. And when I'm looking at a jetty, one thing I'm always trying to look for are places where you actually have holes in the jetty. That's really, really key on a lot of these jetties you'll fish. And what I mean by a hole in the jetty is literally you're going to be going across some of these. Let me try to find one for you guys really quick. There should be one right around here. This one does not. Sometimes it's interesting because sometimes, depending on what the water level is, which is pretty important down the river as well, there will be holes in these jetties that are easily accessible, and then sometimes there's not holes in the jetties because that water level is too low. And so this is something I use Google Earth sometimes to kind of find. And so you can see in this image there's no holes in this jetty, though I know that there are in certain times of the year. So let me go up the river a little bit further and try to find another one that does. And these holes in the jetty are super key when you're fishing in the summertime because they kind of have these openings that these fish really like to get around. And for the life of me, I cannot find one of these jetties that has a hole in it, but let me find one. There should be one somewhere up here at least. Here we go. So right here, one of these potentially does. I should have been more prepared, guys. I apologize for that. I'm trying to find one of these jetties with a hole in it. We may have to go up to a different pool even for me to find one, which is crazy. The water level here, they just don't have a very good picture of the water level. Let me just go up real quick up here to Dardanelle because I know that there's jetties with some holes up here that we'll kind of take a look at. Actually, let's go right below Dardanelle. We'll go to one of these jetties and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. Find one of these real quick. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So this is what I'm talking about, guys, when I'm finding a hole in the jetty. There's literally going to be an opening or an open space, and that current is going to flow in and out of that jetty. And when that current's flowing out, those fish will like to set up on these outside corners because all the bait fish and stuff will get pulled out of this backwater area, and it's going to be great. And then when that water is coming in, so basically when the water is dropping, the river's falling, that water will pull out of this backwater, and these fish will set up on these outside corners. And then when that water is coming in, they'll set up on the inside corners. And so I'll actually position my boat here and cast over the top of this hole, and I'll kind of crank, and a lot of times you'll hook a fish over the top of the jetty here where that current's going around and pull them over the top of this hole in the jetty. And I would say that this is probably my number one or number two patterns for catching fish on rivers when there's current, is just running the holes in the jetties. You can just do that all day long. And as long as you know where all of them are, you can kind of just rotate them all day long and catch a really good limit of fish. And so, as you can see, which is actually a good kind of case or a kind of an example, is that these jetties aren't always going to have holes in them just because of that water level. And that water level is going to dictate when you're going to have a nice hole. So here's one down here. I probably should just come back down to this one. There's one right here. You can see that that hole in the jetty is very obvious. It's there. But if you go back to different times of the year, that jetty sometimes has a hole in it, sometimes it doesn't. And so it's very important to pay attention to that water level as well when you're fishing river systems, because a lot of the cover and things is so shallow, it's only 2, 3, 4 foot of water, that if the water level drops a half a foot, a lot of times it can leave a lot of that cover high and dry and you won't be able to find those fish. And so pay attention to that water level. It's really important, and just kind of think about that when you're running down the lake. What cover is going to be available at each water level? And so that's the jetties. Another thing that's really good to fish is the main river grass. And grass is an awesome place to fish on river systems if you have it. And usually I'm looking at main river coontail grass, lily pads, or bank grass, which would be like your water willow grass. So for example, this is big mats of water willow grass, and I crushed them down the stretch. I've actually made a video. I caught like a 3-pounder right here and a 4.5-pounder here. I caught them flipping all this grass really well. And there's a lot of grass actually on this lower end of the Maumelle pool, all through here and all the way up this way. And it's all just on the very main river. And a lot of times the best grass I find is going to be on the outside bends of this main river channel. And the main reason for that is because you have to think about how this current flows on a river. The current is going to flow basically down the river. And so as you can actually look at your dam if you're confused on which way the current flows. Just look at the dam and figure out which way that water is flowing out of the, like where you get these kind of tail races, the white caps by the dam. That shows you the direction the river's flowing. So this river is kind of flowing, in this example, from west to east. And so the current is going to be flowing down this main river channel, down this way, and through the dam. And so a lot of times your best places to fish in the current, when there is current, is on the outside bends of your main river channel, because when that current comes through, it's going to bounce and hit off of all of the outside bends of that river as it makes its way down the river. A lot of people think the current just flows in a very linear fashion. It just follows that channel perfectly. But no, it's kind of like ricocheting a pool, like a billiards ball off of a pool table. When you have that ball ricocheting off the edge of the table, it'll bounce kind of to a new direction, and it's not going to follow the contour of the table or whatever. It's going to go straight until it hits the next wall. Same thing with that current. That current's going to flow, it's going to slam into one of these banks of the river, and then it's going to get pushed the other direction until it slams into another bank of the river and keeps going down. And so these outside bends of the main river channel are going to have that current crashing into it, which is going to have stronger current, and it's going to stir up the bait fish more, stir up the plankton, get the bait fish more active, and get the bass more active. So all of my best stretches on the river when I'm fishing grass are grass on the outside bend of the main river where that current is hitting the strongest. I have caught some fish fishing the inside bends of the main river, but usually it's not that productive in when there's a lot of current. The only time I really fish the inside bends of the river, which we'll get to, and I feel like I'm going to keep talking so much. It's going to be like a 3-hour stream if I keep talking about all the aspects. There's so much to go into. I know you guys probably aren't going to be complaining if I do like a 2-hour stream, but there's so much that goes into river fishing, just fishing in general. I could talk about this stuff. I do talk about this stuff all day. Basically, the only time I fish the inside bends of these main river channels is when I don't really want the current to have a strong impact on the fish, which is a lot of times in the winter time. When that water's colder, those fish, they like to get on the main river where that current's flowing, but they don't want to be in that strong current because they're kind of lethargic. They don't want to fight the current that much. So a lot of times I'll fish the inside bends of the main river in the winter and the outside bends in the summer when the water's warmer. Also like to fish the outside bends of the river in the fall as well. So kind of that warmer months when that water temperature is above 70 degrees, outside bend of the river channels are better. When that water temperature is below 70 degrees, fish the inside bends of the river channel, and you're going to do a lot better. So that's just a little tip for you guys if you're fishing river systems. And so that was the kind of grass deal. You also have lily pads. There's some lily pads here, like 5 here in the Maumelle pool. Not that many on the main river. There are a lot more if you go up to other pools, the Arkansas River. Specifically, I catch a lot of fish on Lake Dardanelle. And usually you're going to have more vegetation the larger and more expansive your fishery or your pool of the river is. When they're very narrow, you'll have less vegetation, and then as they get wider, you'll get more vegetation, and that's just because you get more flat zones, and so in flat areas in the river. And so a lot of times, for example, I catch good fish as I'm running up the river up here off the points of like these islands and stuff, where you have the main river channel literally swings right here. That main river channel swings in. Let me show you on Navionics what this looks like. Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure I actually transition. Last couple streams I've not been doing that. Go back up here to Dardanelle. Here's a stretch, that island right there, and you can see this island right here. That's where those lily pads were, and that main channel is within maybe 30 yards of that stretch of lily pads. And a lot of times I like to find, again, kind of that outside bend. This is kind of that outside bend of the river. It comes through here and swings in through here, and it's runs close to those lily pads, and that's really what I'm looking for. So if we go back over to Google Earth, pull this up over here, you'll find that stretch of lily pads right here is very close to that main river channel, and a lot of fish will stack up here. I actually caught a really big one. Actually, when I was in that PowerPoint, one of the big fish I was holding up was a 5-pounder off this exact spot on lily pads. And you can catch fish back in the backwaters and lily pads as well. We'll talk about that when there's no current. But usually when there is current, you want to be on that main river channel or close to that main river channel where it's deeper water. And so kind of going back to Navionics just to make sure that this point is super clear. For example, when I'm back down here on the Maumelle pool, the bank where I'm fishing on the grass, you can see the main river channel runs this direction from the main river. It runs like this. It swings this way, hits up against the bank right here, and then cuts back. And right in through here is one of my best stretches for catching really big fish. It's where that main river channel really hits in hard and then gets pushed this way. And I I've caught a lot of big fish in the grass on these stretches. And if you kind of take a look at this pool again too, you'll notice that it's a little bit wider down here on the bottom section of this pool, and this is where all the grass is. There's very little grass as you get further up this pool into the narrower stretches, and that's how it is on most river systems. A lot of times you won't find grass on the narrower stretches. It's always going to be where you have your wider, flatter areas, and usually on the lower end of your pool. So if you're not finding grass in your river system and you're fishing on the very upper end of a pool, it might take some time to find it, and you may have to run all the way down to the bottom of the pool, but that's usually where you'll find it. Same thing like if you're fishing pool 6, which is a little rock pool, very little grass in this stretch of the river, like barely any. And as you get all the way down towards the bottom here, where it starts to kind of get a little bit wider, there's a lot of grass down here. Same thing happens when you fish, well, not so much on tar camp pool. There's a little bit of grass, but not that much. But again, all the grass is down the lower end of the pool. So hopefully that all makes sense. So that is that. Let me pull back the PowerPoint. The last thing was the main lake wood. That's what I need to talk about. So main lake wood, let me transition over here to Google Earth one more time. And we are probably going to need to hurry through the rest of the rivers if I want to finish the stream on time. Let's hear in the comments, would you guys rather have me just keep talking for like 2 hours? Or would you rather have me split this up into 2 separate streams so you guys don't have to get worn down by tons of fishing knowledge for 2 hours straight? I have a feeling I know what the answer is going to be, but I'll ask anyways just to be nice. So if we go down here to the pool, down here towards the bottom of the Maumelle pool, one of the other things I like to fish I mentioned was the laydowns. And a lot of times what I'll find is that the best laydowns on the main river are actually going to be somewhat out of the main current. They're not going to be right on those main current break areas. So for example, there's some really nice laydowns on this bank right here. It's a little bit hard to see. Sometimes the laydown stuff will shift because of the current. Let me find them real quick. So there's like a bit, you can see there's a big tree or a big laydown right there. And there's a bunch more laydowns like right here and all down this bank. These are all really juicy laydowns. And if we take a look at this part of the river, what you'll see if we go over to Navionics is that, and everyone says 2 hours, go, go, go. Okay, that's what I thought you guys were going to say. So I'll just keep going. This is going to be a long podcast. Hopefully, if you're driving to the lake, you have a long commute. Or actually, this is perfect. If you're listening to this on the podcast, or if you have to jump off the stream, you can listen to it on your hour drive to the lake and finish it on your hour drive after the lake. That's perfect. So actually, I would love that if most podcasts were like 2 hours long. So I don't know if you guys listen to podcasts while you go to the lake. I do all the time. That's one of my favorite things to do. Listen to podcasts. Good ones to check out. Bass Talk Live is a good one. They have a lot of pros that get on there. And then there's the Let's Talk Fish, which is a Brian Thrift podcast with Brian Thrift and Matt Airy. And they don't post that often on that podcast, but if you go back in the history banks, they give a lot of good information. So Let's Talk Fish and Bass Talk Live, good podcast to listen to if you want to listen to a fishing podcast. So basically, if we go back over to the laydowns, got off topic there, but here's that basically that island that I catch a lot of good fish on those laydowns. And one thing you'll notice is that these laydowns are not right on that main channel. So they're not right on this channel, but they're very close to that channel. They're within, again, 30 yards of that channel, which gives those fish the ability to go move out of the trees and out to the main channel if they want to, but they can get in behind here too and kind of set up on these trees. And this works really well in the fall. They're pretty good in the springtime as well, and I've caught them there in the summer, so it's kind of a year-round thing. But usually when you're on the main river and there's current, you want your cover to be somewhat close to that main channel, if not right on it. Usually the rocks and the grass are better when that channel's right up against it or close, and then your lily pads and your laydowns are better when you're not right on the main channel, but you're in close proximity. So anyways, this is that's basically kind of the areas I'm fishing on the river systems. And so let me go back over to the PowerPoint and switch back over here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Let me know, guys, too, if you like this format of me talking through all the concepts, things like that. I know at the beginning I was very basic, and so let me know if you want me to continue talk about this very basic intro to all these topics, make sure everyone's on the same page, or if you guys just want me to jump straight into it and you feel like that 5 to 10 minutes of kind of exposition is a little bit too much. So let me know. I'm not really sure what you guys need. So leave a comment down below in the YouTube video. If you're on the podcast, you can always go onto YouTube and leave a comment as well if you're really invested. And if you are listening on the podcast app, definitely leave a review of the podcast. The #1 reviewed podcast on the app is Bass Talk Live with like 1,200 reviews. It'd be awesome if we could make this the #1 reviewed podcast on the iTunes page, and it would be Fish the Moment, #1 podcast. That'd be pretty cool. And if you guys can get to it's the #1 podcast, I guarantee you, and I promise you that I will start bringing on like pros and start doing things like that where I can, I'll bring in guys like Jacob Wheeler, I'll get Rick Klund to come in, some of the guys I know who are buddies, and get them on the podcast, and we can talk some strategies and stuff like that as well. So if we can get over Bass Talk Live's number of reviews on the Apple Podcast app, then I will start bringing in pros. So go review this podcast. It's on there right now. Just go to your phone, Apple Podcast app, Fish the Moment podcast. It's there. Anyways, so the next thing we want to talk about is kind of where to fish when there's no current. So without current is going to be different from when there is current. So that current is really, as we saw before, we're going to position those fish on the main river, and I'm looking at main river cover and structure. Without current, though, the two key things you're going to focus on are your backwaters and your main river sandbar drops. This is something that's very sneaky. No one talks about. It's one of my favorite things to do. And unfortunately, over the last 2 years, the Arkansas River has been destroyed by all the flooding. And so all of the places where I could go fish sandbar drops were like, the current was flowing 300,000 cubic feet per second. There was no way that I was going to be able to fish the main river. It was crazy. And so hopefully one of these years we're going to get a year where there's no current flowing on the river. It happened several years in a row when I was in high school. And these main river sandbar drops are amazing. And usually what I find is when there's no current, two things will happen. One, those fish again are going to push either further back in the backwaters, or they're actually going to get deeper because the lack of current is going to cause the water to clear up on your river systems. If we actually take a look at Google Earth and go back in time, we can actually see sometimes when this happens on the Maumelle Pool, where in certain years that water is much cleaner than other years. So for example, if we look at this 2018, you can see we kind of have this kind of dingy color to the water. Same thing happens when you get into this 2017, but when you get to the 2015, especially 2014, and all the way back to 2013, this is like when I was fishing out here, this water starts getting very, very clear. And this is the year, 2012, when I did most of my fishing on the river. And if you compare 2012 water clarity to like 2017, here you have a foot, maybe foot and a half visibility at the most on the river. Back in 2012, we had, and that's that fall and summer, we had like 3 foot of visibility on the river. It was crazy. And these rivers get really, really clear, and there was no current at all, and that river was very clear. And it made the fishing very difficult for a lot of guys. Fortunately, though, I figured out that you can catch them on these sandbar drops, and I was able to win so many tournaments fishing sandbar drops over the years. And that's something that I have tried to figure out over the years to kind of replicate on your lakes and things like that, but it seems like on these rivers, the conditions need to line up perfectly. No current, clear water, that's when the sandbar drops happen. So it's a very specific pattern, but when you need to use it, it's the best thing you can do. So we'll talk about that. But let's talk about backwaters first, because that's just kind of a little bit easier topic to discuss. Sandbar drops take a little bit to get into. So basically with backwaters, what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a backwater is an area that's off the main river channel that's somewhat protected from the current. So what I mean by like a backwater would be, for example, over here, where you go out of the main current and you go back behind this island and you have some nice clean water, or calm water, not that much impact from the current. There is some current impact, but not a ton. And usually you're going to have more vegetation. So you'll have some grass, you'll have lily pads, stuff like that. And if we go to some other sections here, you can see that you have some backwaters that, you know, are pretty close off the main river. And like this one back here, you can see there are lily pads all over the back of this thing. And I've caught some fish back in here before in these lily pads in shallow water. But also there's like these river arms. You can go way back into these rivers, and some of these backwaters have like cypress trees in them, lots of lily pads. And this is the Little Maumelle River. And this place is loaded certain times of the year. And so usually if there's no current, one of the main approaches I'm going to take is getting out of the main river and running into the back of some of these creeks. You have Little Maumelle Creek, you have Big Maumelle Creek that runs all the way back here. And I mean, I'm running, guys, when I'm fishing these rivers, I run like all the way back here. One of my favorite places on the river back here is actually, if you run all the way back here and you fish this river, there's actually a old like bridge that runs right here that just runs in the center of that river, and also another one right here. And there's like a rocky area, and those fish will stack up on this stuff. And usually when you're running back in these creeks, the challenge with fishing backwater is that these fish are going to stack up in small little zones. They're not going to be all over this backwater. Usually what you'll find is that there's going to be like a 200 to 300 yard stretch where these fish are just grouped up. And just kind of give you an example of some backwaters, there's that one there. Another one, if we go down to the Tarkant Pool or Redfield Pool, for example, one really good backwater is I run, well, a couple of them. You can run through here off the main river, run way back into this backwater slough, go around this turn, go back in here, and we caught them once we got around this, I think it was, yeah, it was this, where are we? Oh yeah, this bend. We got around this bend and got to here. So it's basically from here to here. The fish were loaded in there. And you could just pull up and just catch them flipping laydowns, fishing a little fluke, fishing a spinnerbait, whatever you wanted to throw. And it was easy. When you get around them, you can catch them like crazy on the rivers. The problem is that when there's no current on the main river, these fish get in these backwaters and they're just in very isolated areas. And it takes a long time to find them. And so my recommendation is when you're trying to fish these like where you have tons of backwaters and you don't really know what to do, all you need to do is cover water. Pick a bait that you can cover a lot of good water with, like a creature bait, flipping a creature bait, throwing a spinner bait, throwing a top water, something that you can cover a lot of water with quickly. And don't fish too slow. Don't pick apart every piece of cover. Maybe fish every third or fourth piece of cover. Because usually once you start getting bit, then you can kind of start slowing down and your bites will start to kind of pick up. And so one of my favorite baits is a crankbait to cover water, but also just like a quarter ounce slip sinker on like a reaction aviation sweet beaver. And I'm just pitching every third or fourth piece of cover, pitching every 10 to 15 feet, working my way through this creek really quick. Trolling motor on 50%, just ripping through here. And once I get a bite, I'll slow down and start picking apart the cover, figure out where that zone is, and you start catching them. And that's really good when there's no current in the summertime, but also there's times when you don't want to fish in the current on these river systems. And that's a lot of times during the spawn and when those fish are just getting in that pre-spawn mode. And these fish don't like to spawn in that current very well because a lot of times that current will wash away the eggs and it just makes it hard for these fish to spawn. And so what I'll do is I'll run way back in the back of these backwaters. And again, I'm looking for places that are kind of out of the way. So a couple places that I fished is one way back in here, in this backwater back in here, and there's grass and you can catch some really big fish back in here in the spring. And this is where a lot of your river system bass will spawn, in the backs of very shallow backwaters as far off the main river as you can get. And I'm talking about running over like this flat here. I idled this whole flat, found a way to get through it. This is just a giant stump flat. It's awful to run through. You'll rip off your lower unit if you don't idle the whole thing. And it's like a foot of water. You just have to run across it. Same thing with this area here. You can run around here and burn across this flat, super, super shallow, get all the way back here. And then back in here, you get some lily pads that start showing up. You get some really shallow ponds that have a little bit deeper water in them back in here and kind of back in here. And this is where these bass will spawn, in these out-of-the-way, shallow backwater areas, way off the main river, and a lot of them are hard to access. You have to run over shallow water, over sandbars, basically hold on for dear life and just pray that you don't wreck your boat kind of things. And so that's what I'm looking for on these pools, and they work so well. It's a great way to catch them. And again, it's good when there's no current on the main river during the summer and like the hotter months. And then during the spring and the winter, this is where I spend the most of my time, is off the main river, actually back in these backwaters. And so we'll talk about seasonal patterns as well for the rivers, so don't worry about that. So, and someone asking, where are the bass? Hopefully this is explaining it. But the bass would be like kind of just on these banks on the bank. Fishing on rivers is pretty straightforward. Basically, visible cover. If there's grass there, if there's wood, just go flip it. Throw a spinnerbait. River fishing is not difficult. The difficult part is locating them. Once you locate them, catching them is very easy. So for example, like in this backwater, one spring, we fished all over this pool. all over, all around. We went back in here. We ran all the way back up in here. Nothing. Finally made it back in this little pond. And in like 2 hours, like probably an hour and a half, we caught like 30 fish and had 17 pounds out of this little tiny pond. And we didn't hardly get a bite the entire rest of the day. But when we got back in this little pond area, they were just stacked. And so a lot of times these river fish will group up in very small groups. And a lot of times that's dictated by the vegetation, but also a lot of times in like the summer and stuff, when it's not spawning season, it's dictated by bait fish and forage. So a lot of times it's weird, but you'll find, for example, on the backside of a jetty like this, you might find that there's a ton of shad piled up right in through here, and you have to run all the way around this flat, boom, run through here, run across this, finally get back in here where you can get behind this, and there might be a bunch of gizzard shads piled up right here. And this is where you find them in the summer in these kind of backwater areas, and that bait fish is what's holding those fish. Oh, by the way, Thomas, thanks so much for the super chat. I got a $9.99 super chat saying, let me see, he says thank you. I appreciate that for sure. Thank you, Thomas. So, yeah, if you guys do want to do a super chat donation for the live stream, you can just click the little money icon that's down there below the chat, and you can just do a small donation. I'm doing these live streams just for fun, so don't feel the pressure to donate. But if you guys do enjoy the content and want to support more future live streams, things like that, definitely leave a super chat. And if you do want to start kind of suggesting ideas for live streams, support me in a better or a different way, not a better way, but a different way, you can join my Patreon page, which is just over here in the center of the screen, just to the kind of right of where I am. And my Patreon page is a place where you can do a small monthly donation, and you can do a $5 donation all the way up to $100. And if you donate to the $5 tier, you can vote on all the video ideas or the live stream topics for this live stream. And there's also other perks you can get through that $5 tier. And while I'm talking about other stuff, I do want to take a quick break to talk about some of the other services I have through Fish the Moment. We are kind of at the 45-minute mark, and so I do want to give you guys a little bit of a break from fishing, let you kind of soak all it in, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the services, again, I have on fishthemoment.com. So let me pull that real quick and just kind of talk to you about what I have available. I know a lot of you guys have heard this, but there's no ads on my YouTube or on my podcast app, and so my podcasts are not monetized in any way. And so the only way that I can really make any money off the podcast is if you guys kind of do things like come to the website, support the channel through Patreon, things like that. And so fishthemoment.com is my website, and a couple things you guys can find on there that are pretty interesting. One are my lake breakdowns. These are breakdowns that I do in conjunction with Randy Blockett, who is a tour pro, $1.9 million in career earnings, fished for over 20 years on the Bass and the FLW Tour, 18 Bassmaster Classics / Forest Wood Cup appearances. And we're making these maps 4 a week, and this week we added 4 new ones. We have Cumberland Lake in Kentucky, Kentucky Lake in Kentucky, Chickamauga in Tennessee, and then Sam Rayburn Lake in Texas, all spring breakdowns. And we're going to be doing spring breakdowns all the way through the 1st of May, then we're switching to the summer breakdowns, and we're going to be breaking down lakes all across the country, again, 4 a week. So we're going to try and knock out as many lakes as we can, and we have a lot going so far, and so that's something that's really great. They're $75 for 60 spots. You get detailed breakdown of what the areas are, descriptions, the best conditions to fish, as well as the best lures to use. And Randy also does a great job based on his experience of giving you really detailed information about what are some of the key things to look for on each of these fisheries. So you're going to be getting information about how the different weather conditions affect the fish. Over the years, how the fish population has changed, how the vegetation and things have shifted and changed how the bass behave. And he's fished all these lakes for years and years and years, so he has so much good information over 20 years of experience, and he just lets it all out there. And that's one thing I talked to him about when we started doing this, is he's giving away everything. All the spots he caught him on in tournaments, all that stuff. He's not holding back. And so amazing he's doing that, and definitely worth $75. I also add some other graphics, things like that I make that will give you a really good understanding of how seasonal patterns work, baits to use, stuff like that. And if you don't have your map broken down here, one thing we can definitely do is take a look at your lake on a one-on-one video lesson. You can do a video lesson with me, talking to me over Google Hangout, and it's a great way to just break down your lake. I'll go through everything with you, from seasonal patterns, locations, areas, Google Earth, Navionics, everything like that. And that's pretty much it. The other thing you can do is check out some of my fishing playbooks. I got the Fish the Moment Offshore Fishing Playbook, my Ultimate Guide to Fishing Rods, which is basically, this is so cool. This Ultimate Guide to Fishing Rods gives you all of this really detailed information about what fishing rods I use. It's going to give you information about how many applications I use on each rod. I rank the rods I use based on number of applications. I give you, by every bait and every weight bait, I give you the best rod and action I use with multiple brands at multiple price points. So definitely something cool to check out there. And I'll be making more of these playbooks for like pre-spawn, post-spawn, summer bass fishing, all kinds of stuff going forward. So that's enough of that. Spent enough time doing all that. But going to jump back over to the PowerPoint, and we're going to keep moving on. Thank you guys for just listening to my little advert there. Without having company sponsor me, this is the way I got to do it. And I've tried to stay away from doing ads and stuff on my YouTube page, just because I really don't feel like I should be selling anything to you guys from a company perspective. I want to sell you stuff that I'm working on that I believe in, but I don't want a company paying me to say, use this bait, use this thing. That's not really my style. And so, if you guys can support me in other ways like Patreon and through some lessons and stuff on my website, that's the best way to make sure I can keep making this content and putting out the free content as well for you guys every single week. So anyways, for the other part, we talk about backwaters. Now let's talk about those main river sandbar drops. I left you guys kind of hanging on the sandbar drops. And this is something that is a big secret. Like, it's not that big of a secret, but it's enough of a secret that not that many guys know about it. And the sandbar drops, what it is, I didn't know what sandbar drops were first off for like years. People would talk about them and I had no idea or what they were talking about, how to fish them, all that stuff. And so let me pull up Google Earth and Navionics and really dive into what a sandbar drop is, because I didn't know what they were and I feel like I kind of fished the wrong thing for a long time, and so I'm going to kind of speed up the learning curve for you guys. So the first sandbar drop I ever caught fish on was literally this one right here on Pool 5, the Arkansas River, the Redfield Pool. And it's just this spot right here, and it looks like nothing. And most people are like, what is this? And right out here is the sandbar drop, and I'll kind of talk about what that is, but let me go back in time and kind of show you what everything looks like through here on the sandbar drop. So sometimes you can kind of pick up the sandbar, sometimes you can't. It's very difficult to kind of see in certain periods. Let me try to find one image at least that shows it. That first image may actually be the best one. And really all it is, if you guys have seen a sandbar before, it's just literally a big beach of sand. And the thing that's nice, well, there's your like a little bit of sand right there. It's not exactly what I was looking for in my example. Here's kind of a better example of what a sandbar looks like. So it's basically where you have just, it looks like a beach. Like if you're ever driving down the river and it looks like there's a beach on the side of the river, that's what it is. It's your sandbar. And a sandbar drop is where the sandbar drops from being a foot of water into like 5 to 15 foot of water. So it sounds just like it is. But I didn't really know what to look for, what they were all about when I first started fishing them. Brian, by the way, thanks so much for the $10 super chat. And like the logo there, Superman, which is awesome. Appreciate that. So with the sandbar drops, basically what I am looking for on Navionics, let me pull that up really quick, is Navionics. A place, if we go down to the sandbar drop specifically, is an area where that sandbar, which is basically just a flat like beach area, is going to drop from 1 to 2 foot down to at least 8 to 9 foot of water. You want that drop to be from 2 to 3 feet down to like 9 feet. That's what I found over the years with sandbar drops to make them good. You need that drop in depth that's somewhat significant, 2 to 8 feet. And one thing that I always was looking for when I was trying to find these sandbar drops is looking for them in that 8 to 12 foot, like 15 foot of water. But that's not where these fish are. They literally will set up on these sandbar drops in 1 foot to 2 foot of water. Super, super shallow. I'm talking like you can see their backs sometimes. And what this area is, if you look at it right here, it's very shallow off this point. It doesn't really do a good job of showing it on the map. But just imagine off this point, it's like 1 foot of water. And then right here you can see it's 15 feet of water. And there's a point that sticks out. And it drops off from 2 foot into 15 foot off that point. And it's basically like fishing a shallow point with a sharp drop off. The thing about these sandbar drops, though, it's interesting, is that it's literally just sand up there. And so those fish aren't going to relate just to the sand most of the time. There usually has to be something there that these fish are relating to. And in this case, it's actually a shell bed. So there's really two things you want to look for on sandbar drops. It's shell beds and wood. If you can find shell beds and wood on your sandbar drops, you're going to catch them. And so the reason that there are shells on this specific spot is that actually, if you look at this little extra channel, that channel will swing through this area and that current will be taken through this little creek across the tip of this point, and it's depositing shells right there. And so it's where that turn is, that's where those shells are getting deposited. And right where that kind of little creek connects back with the main river, it's pulling shells through here and it's depositing them on that point. And this little shell bed pulled up first time called Limit in a really tough time of year. It was only weighed like 7 pounds, but this is when it was taking like 12 pounds to win a tournament out on the Arkansas River, maybe 10 pounds. And so a 7-pound limit right off the bat in like 6 casts was like awesome. Because then all you had to do was get a 3-pounder or something first thing in the morning and you were money range like every time. And so really cool stuff. And so this is what I was fishing, is that sandbar drop. And one of the things that I really like about these sandbar drops is no one really fishes them and no one understands them. And so you can have them to yourself as long as, again, you have that kind of no current, clear water. No current, clear water. And sandbar drops are also a summertime pattern. Forgot to mention that, but it's a summertime pattern, usually good from May through about September. May through September is kind of your key sandbar drop months, basically warmer water temperatures. And basically when that water starts running through this area and deposits those shells, there's not going to be current going around these sandbar drops at all. It's not a current deal. What it is it's literally just a place where these fish can pull up and feed. And when there's no current and it gets hot in the middle of the day, for whatever reason, these gizzard shad like to pull out of this main river channel up on top of that shallow sandbar flat, that flat part of the sandbar, and they'll start feeding on the plankton and stuff on those shells. And the bass will pull up and eat them. So a lot of times the sandbar drop pattern is only good after noon. It's a noon to like 4 o'clock in the afternoon sort of bite. It's not, you can't catch them there first thing in the morning a lot of times, except for maybe in May when there's like a shad spawn going on. Sometimes you can do that. But most of the time, it's an afternoon sort of bite. So it needs to be from basically, from noon to 4 is kind of your time in the afternoon. And this is one that has a shell bed on it. Another one that's really good that I've caught fish on is right here, which you can't actually see because it's all, there's no mapping on it. So a lot of these spots I basically have just found because I've graphed around or just kind of fished around and found some stuff. It takes a lot of effort to find these sandbar drops. But, let's see here. So the sandbar drop I was fishing was off this area right here. There's a bunch of birds on top of the sandbar, but there's like a point that sticks out and it drops off from the channel. You can't see it because it's not on the map very well. Oh, I'm not on Google Earth. Give me a second. Thanks, guys. So this island here sticks out like this, and there's a point and it drops off from the channel right here. Again, no contour lines. And right here, there's actually, it's really funny, there's guys who put pallets. And you're probably like, what do you mean by pallet? Let me show you. Give me 1 second. Because you're probably like, what are you talking about? And so what I'm talking about is, let me pull up Navionics. You guys are probably like, I know what a pallet is, but like this. Like a literal shipping pallet. That's what these guys are putting on these sandbar drops. And the reason they're doing that is because they want to hide the wood cover they're putting on these sandbars. Because a lot of these fish are going to be setting up, again, in 1 foot to 2 foot of water. And so a lot of times your really good sandbars will actually have big laydowns that have pushed up on top of them. And you'll have these laydowns sticking up on the tops of the sandbars close to a drop. And those spots are pretty obvious and a lot of guys will fish them. But they put pallets down and weigh them down with rocks. And those rocks mixed with that wood attracts all kinds of gizzard shad and will attract those bass. And you can't see the pallets when they're under the water. And so no one knows they're there. And so if you're on a really big flat, for example, like I was looking at over here, you're never going to know where that pallet is because it just never shows up because it's only 6 inches, 8 inches off the bottom of the lake on that sandbar. Now, a lot of times when you have big current and stuff like that, it'll wash all of these pallets and the shells and all that stuff away. So like this sandbar probably isn't good anymore, but people will keep replenishing them. And the way I find all these areas is kind of twofold. One, what I'll do is kind of my old school way of doing it, is I would take a, let me pull this back up real quick. I would take a Carolina rig, and I would take like a 3/4 ounce Carolina rig weight, and I'm throwing it in. I used to just throw your regular weight, but now I throw the tungsten. I would throw the tungsten weight. And I throw these tungsten Carolina rig weights, 3/4 ounce, in like a foot of water, and I'm dragging it over the areas. And that tungsten is really, it gets a really good feel to it. And honestly, I would just put on the bait with like no hook, and I would just put like a little clip or something and clip a bait on so I don't get hung up and lose my bait. And I would just go for hours and hours and hours on these shell beds, bombing that Carolina rig and dragging it across shell beds close to sandbar drops. So for example, another sandbar that we can look at on the main river that's kind of a good one is, for example, like right here in the mouth of this island. Right here you can see that it's a sandbar dropping off into 12, 13, 14 foot of water. And so right there, that's where that drop is. And so I would just come through these areas wherever I would find sandbar, and there was 8, 9 foot of water within casting range of that drop. I would fire that Carolina rig up there in a foot of water, drag it back, and whenever I would feel something hard, I would mark a waypoint, mark where that cast is, and I would come back to it on a day when it was like noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and usually there'd be fish there. Not all of them have fish there. Usually you would need the gizzard shad to be up and stuff like that, but you know, if you found enough of these, you can usually find them up on top of these spots, again, when there's no current. And so I would then position my boat out here, cast up, drag the Carolina rig, find the shells, and then you can catch them really well on a Carolina rig. That's actually a really good bait or a rig to throw. And what I'll do is I'll take the Carolina rig and I'll put like a 4-foot leader on it. And one of my favorite baits to throw is just a Zoom fluke. Just a regular old Zoom fluke. And then also a baby brush hog. So a Zoom fluke in like white and a baby brush hog, 4-foot Carolina rig leader, and basically it kind of gives that bait that weightless approach. And these fish are super, super shallow in 2 foot of water. So a lot of times the only way you can get those fish to bite is when you're throwing, don't throw white, actually throw pearl. But pearl, you throw that thing out there, let it hit the bottom, drag it through the shells. You'll stir up some commotion with that 3/4 ounce weight. You'll have a 4-foot leader, and then that fluke will kind of float by and they'll just eat it. And then also, again, a baby brush hog was really good. And then my other bait that I threw a lot on shell beds that was really, really good is a crankbait. And so either just like a KVD 1.5 square bill is really good, or a 2.5 square bill, really good baits. Another good bait that I caught a lot of fish on is actually the KVD 1.5 shallow. It's a great shell bed bait, especially when they're up real shallow. So KVD 1.5 shallow is awesome. Another bait that's actually really good to throw is a devil's horse, which is a prop bait. And it's weird that you would think to throw a prop bait, but those fish are in like a foot of water. So you'll fire that prop bait out over them, crash it through over the top of those shell beds and the pallets and stuff, and they'll come up and just destroy that bait. It's so fun. And so I love that. And again, these fish are going to be feeding in a foot to 2 foot of water, super, super shallow. They're not going to be out super deep. And so you're not trying to fish in 7, 8, 9 foot. You're fishing in a foot or 2 of water. So that is the way I catch fish on those sandbar drops. And just one more I can show you, I think, actually has a map of it. No, it doesn't. Never mind. Sometimes when you use the Lake Master, you get more map. There's another one that was like right here where I crushed him. And there was like the channel swings in hard right here and comes across, and basically that river would pull out of here, and it would hit up against this edge of this channel and push away, and all the shells would piled up right here on that turn. And it's like a 2-foot sandbar, and they were stacked like 3 and 4 pounders out in the middle of this bay. Again, no current. The current wasn't flowing there when I was fishing it. The current was depositing the shells there when there was current, but I was fishing this when there was no current, just to make that very clear. And yeah, that's about it. So, let's see. Devil's horse. No, that's old school. That's what the fish miser says. Yes, old school baits. Yeah, a lot of guys are, it's funny because they think like I'm only 25, so I wouldn't know the old school stuff. And I mean, I've been tournament fishing since I was 9 years old. So that would be if I'm 25 now. quick math, 16 years of fishing bass fishing tournaments. And so I've kind of been gathering a lot of data for 16 years. And like I've been fishing tournaments as long as some of the tour pros, or a lot of the tour pros have been on the Bass Master Elite series, like the professional tour. Obviously you can't compare my experience to their experience, but just so you know, like I have a lot of experience. I've like been going to the Bassmaster Classic and stuff since I was 9 years old. I know I've been talking to different pros, fished with different pros since I was 10 years old, all over the country. So I do have a lot of experience, though I'm only 25 at the moment. But anyways, so that's kind of the sandbar drop deal. And so I've now spent a full hour just talking about the Arkansas River. We've even gotten to the other river systems, which is not good because I have about an hour of content on the other 2 river systems as well. And so honestly, I think it'd probably be better to maybe break this up into different streams. Honestly, because this is a lot of information, and I still have like 20 more minutes to go on the Arkansas River, so I think I'm just going to go for another 20 minutes, talk about seasonal patterns and baits, which is going to take up some time, then do some Q&A, then we can talk about this on a future stream or future podcast. We can talk about tidal rivers, the northern rivers up north. We can just kind of pick up this topic. And if there's other topics you guys are interested in too, if you're on my Patreon page, I will let you guys vote on upcoming topics. But hopefully, at least you guys are getting information on the Arkansas River. If you fish here, same thing. This applies to on any big southern river. So if you go over here to the Ouachita River, if you're over here fishing even like this river right here is another river that's over by Arkansas, is a pretty good one. And this is the Mississippi. Is a good river. This is the one I was thinking of. This is the Mississippi. Obviously, it's a good river. Don't laugh at me. Mississippi River. One of the areas I was going to talk about, by the way, is I was going to come all the way up here to Pool 8 of the Mississippi River. And I don't know why I'm going way so far away. I have it right here. But one of the places I'm going to check out in a future stream is Pool 8 of the Mississippi River up by La Crosse, Wisconsin. I fished here a lot when I was younger. I actually grew up in Wisconsin. So I'm very familiar with this pool as well. So I'll talk about that in a future stream. But for now, let me go back to the Arkansas River and let's finish this up real quick. So let's pull up the PowerPoint back up here. So next thing to talk about is seasonal movements. And so I'm just going to be kind of quick about this, talk about the seasonal movements and basically the way these fish move from spring, summer, fall to winter. So we'll start with the spring. Basically, keep it very simple. In the spring, these bass are going to want to pull into the backwaters and they're going to want to get around shallow vegetation, stumps, laydowns, things like that. They're a little bit more out of the main river currents. They want to get... Oh, I have nothing on the screen right now. That is good. Let me pull up the Navionics. Give me 1 second, guys. There's nothing on the screen where I'm talking. They're going to want to pull into the backwater areas like in here, back in here. This is kind of where you're going to find a lot of these fish in the backwaters. Usually they're going to be kind of in the backwaters. They're somewhat close to the main river if they're going to be migrating. So these fish are going to migrate in and out. They're not going to be moving so much into like the very backs of these creeks. These fish in the backs of these creeks live there and they'll just stay there year round. Where as opposed to a fish that might spawn in like this little bay will spawn here and then move back out to the main river. So that's that. Then after you kind of get out of that springtime, the fish will start pulling out of these backwaters, getting more towards the main river channel. They'll set up on the main river places that I talked about with the current, so your jetties, your main river grass, stuff like that. Or they'll set up on, like, for example, here's a nice sandbar drop right here from 3 foot of water down to 20 foot. That's a nice little sandbar drop. Same one right here, like 2 foot down to 20 foot right there is a nice little sandbar drop. Actually has some rock there. There's actually an old like road or something right there. It's a good one. So like they'll get these sandbar drops. And then also in the summer, if there's no current, you can catch them way back in these backwaters. These will be your resident fish. They just live back in your always. And so if the main river fish are really tough, you can't find them on the sandbars, run all the way back in these creeks, and that's where you'll find those resident fish, and they're usually easier to catch. And then in the fall, the fish will kind of stay in the same areas, honestly, that they do in the summer. The only thing is that I catch a lot more fish, again, on the... on wood than I do on rock in the fall for whatever reason. I do a lot better on wood. And so, for example, there's a really nice stretch of laydowns. Let me go back over here. Transition over here. There's a really good stretch of laydowns on Pool 7 that's close to the main river channel and has a bunch of stick-ups and stuff. And this is a great little fall bank where you can see there's just piles of timber and just stuff all through here. And there's the main channel's right here. It's super deep. These fish will pull up out of this channel here in the fall. You can catch them throwing a spinner bait and stuff like that. It's really fun. And then in the winter, these fish are pretty tough to catch, honestly, on river systems. If you're going to fish river systems in the winter, I don't ever fish river systems in the winter, honestly, so I don't really have that much great advice. I always just go to the lakes because it's way better. Go like, if you're in Little Rock, go fish Lake Maumelle, go fish, well, that's not that much better than the river, but it's okay. Go to Washita, go to Hamilton, DeGray, places like that, Greer's Ferry. Stay off the river. The river is usually better spring, summer, fall. It's not that great in the middle of the winter time, but if you are going to fish in the middle of the winter, the one thing you want to look for is rock. Rock is going to be key. Find rock places that hold heat, and if there's current on the main river, try to get out of the main river a little bit, away from the current, and try to find like some backwater areas that maybe have some current moving, but not like a strong current. And again, I am not looking at the map again. I apologize. I'm slacking on my duties here. This main river bank here. Don't get on the main river as much. Get more towards the backwaters and find rock. And find rock with steeper channel swing banks, something that's a little bit deeper and steeper, and that's usually going to be really good. And a lot of times, too, another good way to go about it fishing in the winter, if you are going to fish in the winter, is go to the very, very backs of these long backwaters, like super far back in the creek. Usually those fish are a little more consistent, and you can catch them better way back in the creeks in the winter, at least from my limited experience winter fishing on rivers. So don't have too much to talk about there. But last up, before we get into questions, let's see here. The last thing we're talking about, let me pull up PowerPoint. And then also, by the way, guys, if you're on the live stream, definitely start throwing in some questions in the stream. Just put @FishTheMoment and some question marks. And I'll get to some Q&A. I know a lot of guys want to do some Q&A, and so we'll do that here for the last like 20 minutes of the stream. So definitely start leaving some comments down in the live stream, and I'll get to those. But last but not least, let me pull up PowerPoint. Sorry, I'm probably getting a little bit frazzled talking. You guys have no idea how hard it is to talk to a computer screen and a camera for an hour straight. I do it a lot because that's what I do in all my one-on-one video lessons. Well, I do have interactions, obviously, as well, but I'm used to talking a lot. But it's like, I'm just talking literally just to an empty room. It's just me. I kind of want to get a co-host in on these live streams, or maybe not the live streams, but on like if I was doing a podcast or something. But I like talking too much too, so I would probably just be interrupting them the whole time. So at least I can talk without any without any problems. That you guys don't mind too much. But anyway, so yeah, please be leaving comments down below, guys, for sure, because I don't see any right now. And so last but not least are the baits. So my go-to river baits, and there's a lot of baits that throw on rivers, honestly. I mean, it's hard to categorize them in very specific ways, but when I'm fishing the Arkansas River, these southern rivers, go-to baits are easily a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a jig. If you throw a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a jig, you're going to catch fish on the river year-round all the time. Now, other baits that are pretty good, I like to flip a tube in the spring. I like to fish a buzzbait a lot in the summer and the fall. A buzzbait is a great big fish bait on river systems. Black buzzbait with a horny toad on the back. I throw the War Eagle buzz toad. So good for big fish around grass, laydowns, rock, whatever. And honestly, if I'm fishing in the fall in a river system in a tournament, I'll basically just tie a buzzbait on and put one rod in the deck of the boat all day. And that's one buzzbait, and that's all I'm fishing all day long. And usually if I get 5 bites on it, I will win the tournament. If I get 4 bites on it, I'll probably win the tournament. And if I get 3 bites on it, if the bite's tough, I still may win the tournament. That's how good that buzzbait bite is in the fall for big fish. And then other baits I'll have on, I like the Carolina rig for the sandbar drops. Shaky head on the sandbar drops is good. Also a shaky head around the jetties can be very good as well. Something I'll do a lot. But that's pretty much it. I will flip a creature bait as well, so like a sweet beaver, just a regular flipping bait. But it's pretty simple. You know, spinner baits, crankbaits, jigs, it's just power fishing. I mean, if you're a river rat, that's what people call them here in Arkansas, especially Little Rock, you're a river rat, you're really good with a spinnerbait, a jig, a crankbait, and flipping. That's like your deal. And so I have a little bit of river rat in me. I've done really well in a lot of tournaments in the river, and I just fished river a lot. My style I use in my YouTube videos that you guys are most interested in is the offshore fishing. And so that's what I do. I love the offshore fishing. But I would say that I'm equally good fishing rivers with these baits as I am fishing offshore, and probably just because I've done it about an equal amount, and actually learned to grow up. I grew up fishing rivers up in Wisconsin, waiting for smallmouth, so I'm very comfortable fishing rivers and kind of understand them pretty well. And so I am a river rat at heart, but I also really like my electronics, so it's kind of both. So the big thing that we're going to talk about maybe in our stream, just so you guys kind of preface, is large northern rivers. So large northern rivers would be like the Mississippi River, stuff like that. And so I have all kinds of stuff that I prepared. I'll just kind of give you guys a teaser. Tidal rivers, I was going to talk about the tide, all kinds of stuff, Potomac, stuff like that. And that's kind of the end of the slides. But that was what I was going to go to. So I made it through approximately, I made it through 10 of 21 slides. That's pretty good. I got through half of my slides. Dang, that's good. That's not good. So anyways, let me go through and read some of these comments then and start getting through. And I'm actually going to pull up some stuff so I can at least talk through this with you guys, pull up stuff. And if you guys are listening on the podcast, we'll be doing the Q&A. It's not going to be as polished as the first part, so we're just going to be kind of talking, and there may be some silence and stuff like that. So I apologize to the podcast listeners if the second part of the stream is not as polished, but hopefully you'll enjoy it anyways. I need like a moderator who's reading these comments to me. That's how you do it on all the like super polished live streams, but this is just me. So Timo's asking, now that you're a Southern boy, do you put salt or sugar on your grits? Ooh, man. I've done both. I'm not a big grits guy. I love potatoes. Like, if you give me the chance to eat potatoes, I will eat it every single meal. It doesn't matter, sweet potatoes, regular potatoes. I love potatoes. It's the only thing that I crave, and I probably eat potatoes almost every day. I don't know why. My body just craves potatoes, but it does. And I've always just been like that since before I was even born. My mom said when she was pregnant with me, she craved KFC mashed potatoes. That's the only thing that she wanted when she was pregnant. And my dad would drive 30 minutes to go buy her a thing of KFC mashed potatoes. And like they would make them and stuff like that, but she craved those potatoes. And then after I was born, she didn't crave them anymore. And I love KFC mashed potatoes. I don't know why I talked about that, but that's a story. See here, we got Kevin said, North Mississippi. Okay, so the northern Mississippi, definitely I can check out kind of that. I don't really know the pools above pool 8 very well. I know pool 7. I fished there one time, like the what is that place? The big why am I blanking on the name? You guys know what I'm talking about, the big lake that's there. Lake on Alaska. Lake on Alaska. I fished that before. But anyways, Jerry Fuller says, how do you fish a river with just riverbank and no sloughs? So when you're fishing those riverbank rivers, let me pull up one of them real quick because we have one of those here. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up Google Earth. There's one here actually that I fished like a couple times. I don't like fishing them, so that's why I didn't really talk about them. But there's one over here in Little Rock that I fished in tournaments on, and I always hated when we went here. It was always like, I'm like, why are we fishing here? But it's this river right here. This is probably what you're talking about. There's some sloughs on this one. There's a lot of sloughs, but this is kind of I'm assuming what the river you're talking about, where it's just straight up bank, and there's just like nothing. It's just bank, 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 and it goes all the way through. And so my one recommendation is just, if I was fishing a river like this, I would run as far up the river as necessary to get to some sort of creek or some sort of backwater. A lot of times on rivers that are like this, they're really narrow and really winding. You can find some backwater, and usually that's where I'll just go. And like, for example, there's like these horseshoe crescent lakes and stuff. Like I've caught them really well in here, but I've also caught them like up in like this river right here. I've run up this river and caught them all down this stretch really well, all the way through here. But again, if that's not the part of the river you're on and you're too far away from it and you're just like on a stretch that's just straight river, what I would recommend, let me find the straight river stretch, is fishing the any available rock that you can find on the river is really key, and then any big laydowns. Big laydowns, big rock, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And so if there's just isolated laydowns and rock, that's what I'm going to try to fish. And again, in the summer, I'm going to fish the outside bends of those rivers. In the spring, I'm going to fish the inside bends of the rivers. That's about all I got for you. If it were me, I would just try to find backwaters if possible, but hopefully that was helpful. Let's see here. Justin Thomas says, where would you go when it gets super hot, like 80, 90 degrees? So if there's current on the main river, I'm fishing the main river. That's the best place to go if there's current. If there's no current, I'm fishing those sandbar drops. 80, 90 degrees, the sandbar drops are the number one thing to do. The only other thing I didn't really mention is if you have a place where there's really good lily pads, for example, there used to be a lot of good lily pads up here on Lake Dardanelle, I would run into an area that has a lot of lily pads. Lily pads are great when that water temperature hits 80, 90 degrees, like water temp super, super warm, is fishing around lily pads. They give a lot of good shade, and as long as you have deep-ish water close by, and when I say deep water, I mean like 4 foot of water close by. Like if you have 4 foot and the lily pads are in a foot or 2 foot of water, those fish will be there. Even when it's super hot, they'll get super shallow. And I said super a lot of times in that sentence. But I found fish in lily pads in 6 inches of water on Lake Dardanelle, but my boat was sitting in 3 or 4 foot of water. And I was casting up into 6 inches. And so lily pads are really the number one thing if you have them on your river when it gets super hot. The other thing is if there's no main river bite, the current's not flowing, you can't catch them on the sandbars, and you have no lily pads, run way back in the back of the creeks, as far back in the creeks as you can, and find some really like hidden away backwater areas, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. Let's see here. Kevin, have you never thrown a whopper plopper in a river system in the summer? I'm not a whopper plopper kind of guy. I throw a buzzbait. And a buzzbait is my just thing. I don't know why I don't throw whopper ploppers. I just love a buzzbait. I have so much confidence in a buzzbait, and I've just never picked up a whopper plopper. I know there was a craze going on. I completely missed it. I missed the whopper plopper like craze. I know it's crazy. I have some of them, but I think I've caught like 4 fish on a whopper plopper in my life. But I've caught like probably 1,000 to 2,000 fish on a buzzbait. Probably more than that. Probably like 5,000 fish on a buzzbait, just fishing this river. Like I probably caught 1,000 bass from here to here on this river on a buzzbait. Like I'm not even joking. 1,000 fish just right here on a buzzbait. Not let alone the rest of the places. So I love throwing a buzzbait. Let's see here. What is your opinion of moon phases and fishing them? Thanks for help. If you and thanks Carlos. If you want to get my opinion on moon phases, check out my most recent video, my main video. It was the 5 false facts about bass during the spawn. Check out that video. It talks about moon phases. It'll do a lot better job than I can do here. It's my video. It's like a thing. The thumbnail is a picture of a graph, and it's pointing to the water temperature and says the water temperature doesn't matter, which it doesn't in the spring that much. So watch that video if you haven't seen that. That's a really good one. It's like one of my best videos, and no one watched it. I don't know why, but it's about all these different false facts about the spawn. Check that video out. Artie, he's asking, how does what you do change when fishing a small lake where the water level never really changes? That's a really difficult question to answer, Artie, just because I need to kind of have better context on where you are in the country and the type of lake you're fishing. If there's grass, no grass, deep, shallow, clear, dirty water, there's so many factors. A lot of the lakes I fish never have water level fluctuations. It just depends on what is in the lake at that point. Let's see here. Another question from Gary says, Johnny, is it about burning gas and shallow targets most of the time on the river in the summer? How often do you check the deep stuff? So on rivers, deep stuff to me is not a thing. Usually on like this stretch of Arkansas River, deep stuff is the sandbar drops, which is not really deep, it's offshore. So offshore stuff I'll fish, but I've never fishing on the Arkansas River deeper than 5 foot of water usually. Maybe if it's super, super clear, sometimes I might fish 6, 7 foot of water, but most of the time on like this stretch of the river, I'm never fishing deeper than 5 foot. To keep about shallower than 5 foot, fish those sandbar drops, because even when it's super hot and it's like, let's say, 90-degree water, those fish will feed in 2 foot of water on rivers on top of sandbars. They'll literally feed in like 2 foot of water. I found them schooling on this point right here one time. 92-degree water temperature, middle of summer, 110 degrees outside, and they were schooling on big gizzard shad, busting them out of the water like, boo, 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 boo. And I was catching them on a devil's horse right there. So definitely don't need to fish deep. Now, if you're on a river system lake, which would be like a Lake Dardanelle, and it has lake in the name, or you're fishing the Tennessee River lakes, like Kentucky, like Gunnersville, stuff like that, then yes, I am going to fish offshore for sure on like a big backwater area like this on Dardanelle. And I won a college regional championship and a lot of money on Dardanelle fishing offshore, just in here and in here, Delaware Bay and Illinois Bayou. So I will fish offshore, but the big thing is you need to have like these big backwater areas that have deep water in them. This has 30, 40 foot of water in here. And it's not even like a river. This is literally just like a lake. And so I'm not fishing offshore like out here. Like I don't catch fish out on this part of the river. Any offshore fish I'm catching here are all sandbar drop fish through this stretch of the river. The only place I'm catching them like offshore on Dardanelle is here and here. And that's the only place in the Arkansas River I catch them deeper than 5 foot of water, really. See here. Ryder asks, what's your top 3 boot tail swim baits? Not a big swim bait guy, to be honest. I need to get better at it. I plan on doing a lot of that. I'll show you the ones I've actually caught fish on, which is probably about the best I can do for you, unfortunately. Ryder, let me show you what this paddle tail swim baits I fish. Really, the only time I'm fishing paddle tail swim baits is offshore, but one of my favorites is just the old Bass Tricks. This was really big back in like 2007, 2008, and I threw this a lot when I was growing up. But it's the Bass Tricks paddle tail swim bait. Really good hollow body swim bait. Awesome bait. Just put it on a big hook, big bottom weighted hook, belly weighted hook, and throw that around. It's good on a big jig head as well offshore, fishing it on ledges and stuff. Another one is the Mag Draft. Everyone fishes the Mag Draft nowadays. But the Mag Draft Freestyle, Mag Draft Regular, great boot tail swim bait, paddle tail swim bait sort of thing. I know this isn't like a boot tail. I'm not a swim bait guy, so I don't know if this is qualifying for your boot tail. But Mag Draft is a really good one. I've caught fish on it before, and that's saying something given I don't throw a lot of these big swim baits. And then the other one that I've caught fish on is the, what's it called? It is the Jenko fishing. You can see I fish a lot of swim baits. Is it a Jenko? Yeah. The Jenko Booty Shaker. That's a great name for a swim bait. The Booty Shaker. This thing has a lot of kick to it. I've caught them offshore on this when in like dirty water, when you want a lot of water moving, and I throw it in like this olive shad. And it just like kicks water. And I haven't thrown it up shallow, but it does work on a big jig head. And it will move water. So that's a good boot tail, paddle tail swim bait. Let's see here. What if the tide is falling but the wind is opposite? Good question, Timo. So that tide will get held back by the wind, and that will just delay when the tide falls and drops. That tide is going to fall and drop just by nature. But for example, if we're over here, let's go to the Potomac since I didn't get a chance to talk about this. And I know some of you guys are like, talk about tides. We talk about tidal fisheries. I fished tidal fisheries like twice in my life. I fished it a few more times than that, but I fished down on Louisiana Delta. And that's like the only time I've fished tidal waters, really. So I'm not an expert on tides. I know enough from research and just like, I'm a bass nerd. So I have a general understanding, and I've researched it a lot just in case I ever have to go fish tides, so I know what's going on, but I'm not an expert by any means. Basically, that wind will, like, let's say that tide is falling out, and like on the Potomac, you'll have a 3 foot or 2 foot swings of tide. And so if that water's falling out or coming out, the tide's coming out, but that wind is blowing from the east here, it's holding that water in, that tide will drop sooner, and low tide, like the dead low tide, will maybe be delayed by 30 minutes to an hour. And so a lot of times you'll have the tide charts that'll predict when the tide's going to be there, but that wind a lot of times will hold up that tide. And if you're running a specific timing on your tides where, let's say you're running Mattawoman Creek, and you need to be in the mouth of Mattawoman on a grass bed right here or right here, and they're biting right as the new tide starts, when the tide starts moving again, or maybe they start biting right on like the last hour of outgoing tide or whatever it is. A lot of times if that wind's holding that tide back, that last hour of outgoing tide maybe only, it doesn't happen for an hour, or it's kind of delayed by an hour. So like you could be trying to fish this area at 11 and you're not getting bit, and you fish it for an hour and you don't have anything, you're like, crap, this sucks, and you leave. Well, maybe you were catching there in the last hour of outgoing tide, but that tide was getting held back by the wind. So instead of having the last hour be at 11 o'clock, now it's at noon. And so your bite window moved from 11 to noon. That's kind of what happens, is moving these bite windows on these areas. That was kind of very, very quick explanation without any context. So hopefully that made sense. I will talk about this in our stream though, like all the terms and stuff I talked about. And so, Eyes of the South says, fishing playbook, I'm interested. Definitely check it out. Offshore fishing playbook. It is really, really good. Put a lot of hours into it, like 40 hours, putting all the graphics and everything together and like making sure it was good. And I've spent 10 years perfecting everything I put in there. So definitely worth it. And everyone seems to really enjoy it. It's one of the top, most popular things on my website, top selling things on my website. Let's see here. What buzzbait do you like? Good question. I throw one buzzbait and one buzzbait only, and I throw it in one color, and I just carry this one buzzbait. But I used to throw just a regular War Eagle buzzbait before they made this Buzz Toad version, but this Buzz Toad version has actually a really good keeper. I used to actually hand tie on with my fly tying like vise. I would tie on a metal keeper on these War Eagle buzzbaits, but now they make them, which is good. But it's a black on black War Eagle Buzz Toad buzzbait. Best buzzbait on the market, in my opinion. And this is the buzzbait I throw. This is it. This is exactly. I've been throwing it like this with that horny toad on the back since I was 13, 14 years old, probably 14 years old. I've been throwing it like that. I got made fun of for 4 years by everyone in my club. They all laughed at me every time I would come to the tournament with that horny toad and that buzzbait. Everyone would be like, why are you doing that? That's so dumb. Stupid. Why are you putting a horny tail on the buzzbait? That's stupid. And then I won Angler of the Year like 6 years in a row in that junior club. So yeah, I got the last laugh, which was good. But that buzzbait, now everyone knows, put the horny tail on it, it makes it way better. But I seriously got so much crap from everyone for throwing the horny tail on the buzzbait. And I always went fishing with the same boat captain guy most of the time, and so he knew it worked, but everyone else, he wouldn't share. He would kind of like play it up because he didn't want anyone else to know, because it was like my little secret weapon. But people would just see it on the deck of the boat and be like, what are you doing? Anyways, Kevin says, the Whopper Plopper is my staple for me on fishing summer rivers. All sorts of water on the river. Maybe try Whopper Plopper where you fish a buzzbait. Might be something to try for sure. Let's see here. Bob asks, just curious, but why don't you fish big tournaments like the FLW? I had the opportunity when I was 19 years old. I was sponsored by 12 different companies: Strike King, Triton, Mercury, Stren, Plano, Zepco Quantum, a bunch of other companies as well. Stren Fishing. I turned on a full team sponsorship from Pure Fishing, actually, to stay with Strike King back in the day when I was like 14, which is kind of crazy. But I had all the sponsorship lineup. I was even sponsored by Toyota trucks at one point when I was 15 years old, and I couldn't even drive, which was really weird. And then the economy crashed, and then I lost that sponsorship. But I had the sponsorship lined up where I could have done it. I just decided to go to college instead, and I think it was a really good choice for me personally. Let me switch over to this is the sentimental cam. There we go. You can see my face now. Sentimental cam, I can talk straight to your soul. But yeah, I had the option to go fish professionally. I could have gone and fished the Coastas probably and got sponsorship for that. Or not the Coastas, but the Bassmaster Opens, and gone around and traveled and stuff like that. But personally, for me, I wanted to go to college, and I felt that was really important for me. And I worked really hard to get really good grades in high school, and I was going to basically fish college at the University of Arkansas, do that for 4 years, and then pursue professional fishing after college. And it worked out pretty well. I won a college regional championship my freshman year at the University of Arkansas, won Angler of the Year at that club, and was kind of on the path to do it. And then I just got really burnt out. I started traveling around the country college fishing, and I really was struggling trying to focus on school and on fishing. And I realized I was really enjoying my business classes a lot, and I felt like I had a really big passion for business, and it turned out that was a really good decision for me personally. And I also got a lot of advice from, for example, like Greg Hackney and Greg Hackney's dad, Earl Bentz, owner of Triton Boats, as well as a lot of other people. I don't want to name everybody, but a lot of guys basically told me, don't go fish professionally if you have other options. If you have a way to make a degree and do that, you can always fish for fun, or you can make a career out of fishing. And really what Earl Bentz told me when I was thinking about moving into the professional ranks and not going to college, he said, you're going to be way happier with your life if you are owning these fishing companies and having these fishermen come to you as opposed to going and trying to fish professionally. Because really only about 20% of professional fishermen actually make a living fishing. The rest of them have jobs at home. And so they're either plumbers, electricians, they own their own business, and that's why they can do it. They drive trucks in the off season. They do all kinds of stuff to make money. Most professional fishermen do not make a living just off sponsorship and fishing. Now, I feel like I probably could have if I wanted to as well, and I don't think that it would have been that big of a deal to put in the effort to do it. And I feel like I had the skill, and I feel like I still would have had the skill. I was way actually better at tournament fishing when I was like 18 than I am now, just because I was doing it. Like, I fished a tournament every weekend almost for like 3 years up through college and all that stuff. So I was fishing tournaments like constantly. And fortunately, I was making enough money where I could kind of just keep it rolling through the tournaments. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am now, where I've kind of got burnt out of the tournament scene, and I got a lot of advice to not go that way. And I basically stopped fishing for 2 full years. I didn't fish at all for 2 full years in college. I actually didn't pull my boat out of the garage for a year and a half. I didn't cast a fishing pole, I think, for 16 months. I never even casted a fishing pole. And I really just focused on, I really wanted a 4.0 in college, and I got a 4.0 with a double major in economics and supply chain management, and then a minor in Spanish, the language. And so worked really hard to get a 4.0 in all my classes, did a bunch of internships for big CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, and I was having a blast doing all that. And then kind of when I got back into started my MBA program, and I went fishing with a couple of the guys because they wanted to go, and I kind of found my love again for fishing and realized I had a lot of knowledge that it was just kind of going to waste. If I wasn't going to be fishing professionally, why not share the knowledge I have and help people who are struggling to get to the point that I was, learn and kind of flatten that learning curve. The learning curve is really steep for learning how to be a good fisherman, and I had all the knowledge in my head, and I feel like I had the ability to teach as well, something I really have passion for when I was in school, is tutoring, like economics, stuff like that. And so I wanted to kind of bring that all together, and I started making YouTube videos, sharing a lot of stuff, sharing all the spots I fish, all the info, and it just kind of one thing led to another. I was able to now do the YouTube stuff. So you guys probably have, you picked up my journey when I started my YouTube channel, but you missed the, prior 22 years, 23 years of my life before that. And I'll get into that more when I get to, I think when I hit 100,000 subscribers, I want to make a video about kind of what I've done in my past. I mean, I won like 7 casting kids and fishing state championships. So for casting and for fishing, ton of tournament wins at the junior level. Never won a national championship, but I finished every place between second and 10th, except for first in national junior tournaments. Was on a lot of TV shows, all kinds of stuff. I'm actually on the cover of a video game. I have one over there. It's Berkeley's Bass Tournament Tycoon, and I'm next to Luke Clausen and Jay Ellis, and there's me. And so I'll show you guys all that stuff. It's kind of crazy how all that stuff worked out. There's a lot of weird stuff that happened when I was younger, but I'll get into all that in a different thing. But maybe you guys just enjoy me talking about it. And I don't talk about all that much on my videos and stuff like that because I just want to focus on the fishing. But we're now an hour and a half into a live stream, so for the people who are still here, you're probably interested, and also people who are listening to the podcast, you're probably interested as well. So again, I will pull up, I have old footage of me like fishing with Shaw Grigsby on Shaw Grigsby's One More Cast, Striking Pro Team Journal. I fished down there with Mark Menendez, all kinds of stuff when I was younger. I was on the Hog Tank fishing, doing the Bassmaster Classic. I've been on the Bassmaster Classic stage multiple times, Forcewood Cup stage all the time, so all kinds of stuff from when I was younger. You may have even seen me, you just didn't know it was me. I was just a little kid running around in a Triton jersey that was down to my ankles because they only had smalls, and I was like 8. And I was the first person they ever gave a jersey to that was under the age of like 18, which is kind of crazy too. I got a lot of stories. I've not shared with you guys about my fishing career. I hope to share at some point. I could talk for 10 podcasts just on stories about my fishing when I was younger, which I don't know, you guys might be interested in at some point. Maybe when I'm older, I'll reminisce. Anyways, let's see here. Brian says, how many lower units have you wiped out running the rivers? 0. Knock on wood. I've not ripped off any lower units. I'm very careful when I go run places. Usually what I'll do is I will go in there by idling. If I can't get in there, I'll convince one of my friends to run in there who's more of a daredevil than me, and we'll run in there and we'll wreck his lower unit. I've had several lower units knocked off while I'm in the boat, but it's never been my boat. You have to be smart about it. If you're going to run rivers, have a lot of friends who are a little bit more daredevilish and who are very easy to convince that there's 20 pounds back behind this super shallow sandbar and you see a stump right in the middle of the path you need to go there, but say it'll be fine, it's all sand, and just run it. And it works every time. You just need to find that one guy. Anyways, let's see here. Ryer says, if you don't fish swim baits, what do you fish instead? That is everything but swim baits. I don't fish swim baits. I fish that's like, if you look through here, basically everything that's on here on Tackle Warehouse, other than the swim bait category, I fish everything else here. You're not seeing my screen, you're seeing my face. But basically everything else. And I will fish swim baits. I fish offshore swim baits. I fish finesse swim baits, like 3 and 4 inch swim baits a lot. That's literally what I like to do offshore, like the Megabass Spark Shad, stuff like that, the Kitech 3.8 inch, 3.3 inch, 4.3 inch. Those are the swim baits I throw. But I throw them offshore. I don't throw a lot of swim baits up shallow. Not really my deal. Let's see here. And then Barry says, what about you being a guide? So I have done some guiding, some on-the-water fishing lessons, stuff like that. And I did that a lot this last year. But I don't know. I enjoy it, but at the same time, I feel like I can't get as much information out while I'm taking a full day to take people out on the lake. And so I'm only giving information to one person. But I feel like for me, I have the ability to give out information to a broad audience, and I can make videos about it and do things like that. And I've found ways to monetize my business and found revenue streams that I don't have to go on the water and guide. So I do enjoy it. I really like doing on the water fishing lessons. I get a lot of requests for them. But I also like to take the 8 hours, instead of doing that, to make a video explaining how you can go learn how to catch fish and teach you the stuff I would teach you in an on-the-water fishing lesson in a video. I know it's not the same, but I can reach more people and kind of achieve my goal of teaching people how to fish in a grander scale, or a broader scale. Not grander, but broader. Anyways, no comments about me when I was younger. That's good. I'm glad you guys aren't slamming me. Let's see here. And then Off-Road says, thanks for sharing your knowledge. Most anglers will keep everything a secret. Thanks again. Great job. Appreciate it. And then Aaron says, when will we see your bass cave? I'm actually moving here pretty soon into a new house that my fiance and I just built. And so once we move into our new house, then I will show you my bass cave. It's kind of all over this little apartment, and so it's not in one solid location, but now I'll have like an actual place where I can put all my stuff, and like I'm gonna hang it up on pegboards. Very excited. Right now it's in these like bins, and it's a nightmare. It's terrible. How do you fish big boulders? That's Mitch. That'll be my last question, guys. Let me basically, big boulders, what I will do is I just graph over them, and I'll fish them either with a jig, a swim bait, drop shot. Really the big thing is just fish that bait up the boulder, over the top of the boulder, and then back down the boulder. And not really that hard. Just the hardest part is locating them and finding them. But I love a jig and a swim bait through big boulders usually, because usually I'm catching smallmouth in that type of area. So anyways, and then Timo says, only 14 likes. Please hit the like button. Yes, I appreciate that. If you guys hit the like button, also if you will subscribe to the YouTube channel. I know a lot of guys who watch this live stream are not subscribed. So if you're this far into the stream, there's 309 of you on the stream right now. And if you stuck with me for an hour and 40 minutes of me just talking, you definitely, I feel like, hopefully like the channel, or you just really don't like yourself because you're forcing yourself to listen to something you don't like. But hopefully that's not the case. You like what I'm talking about. And if you do, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. About only 30% of my audience is actually subscribed. And also, if you guys are watching this on the podcast, app and you're listening to the podcast, please write a review on the podcast. If you made it this far, just write a review. Just say, hey, this podcast is good. I like what Johnny's doing. He shares good information. I like what while I'm listening to driving down the road. If you don't like it, you can say that as well too. That's fine. And just let me know. But leave those reviews. Again, if I can get to like 1,200 reviews, more than Bass Talk Live, become the most reviewed podcast on the app, then I will start bringing in pros to start, like, I'll actually make this like a real thing and make a podcast that's very like high production value in these live streams as well. Start bringing in pros and we can do topics and stuff like that. Right now, it just doesn't make sense because I don't really make any money off of it. But if I got to the highest reviewed podcast, I could find ways to monetize the podcast and the live stream better, and I could raise the production value a lot. And so for right now, we're just going to keep it this way because this is the best way I can do it. And I just like talking to you guys and kind of a little more one-on-one. But other than that, hope you guys are enjoying this live stream. I'm going to be doing them every single week going forward, except for I'm getting married here pretty soon. So after I get married, I might take like a 2-week break from the live stream. But I will be making podcasts, or I'll be posting this live stream on the podcast platform. So on my YouTube page, it'll be on a live stream. And then on the podcast app, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, it will be on there is just like Fish Moment Podcast number 3/live stream 49 or whatever it is. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the stream again, and thanks for everyone's support. Thank you for the super chats tonight. Let me try to pull that up real quick just to see. We have Thomas and Brian. Thomas with the $9.99 super chat and Brian with the $10 super chat. Thank you guys so much for the super chats and for the support. So anyways, definitely had a blast today talking about river systems, and if I didn't get to all your questions, I apologize. We'll catch them on the next stream. And if you are on my Patreon page, look out for my new poll that I'll be posting with video topics and ideas for the next stream. So other than that, thanks again for checking out this stream, and I'll see y'all next one.